Hey friends, my name is Zah and this is the Daydreaming Wolves podcast, in which I talk about folk herbalism, the tarot, trauma-informed magic, as well as the politics of healing and small business adventures. Sometimes it's just me sharing rituals and inspiration, and sometimes I have beautiful like-minded guests on the show. If you would like to learn more about my work, you can visit daydreamingwolves.com for all things magic and sarahmagdalenalove.com for web design and tech support. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes, and if you like my podcast, know that a review would really be appreciated. Hi new friends, thank you so much for tuning into the Daydreaming Wolves podcast. This is a pleasure and passion project of mine, and I'm really excited to share some interviews with you. And this episode is just going to be me talking about my intention for this podcast and kind of what I want to offer to the world. So I'm re-recording this actually more than a year after starting this podcast initially, and that's because a lot has changed since then. I've been able to put a lot more energy into it. I've had really amazing people on the show, and I kind of had a chance to reconsider what I want to do with this. And my focus has changed a little bit. A lot of new listeners have come into my world, so I kind of re-listened to this initial first episode a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed that some of these things were no longer feeling true for me, and that's not something that I regret. I think that's just normal, but it's beautiful sometimes to go back in time and see, things have changed and some things feel better. They feel more authentic and more me, and I'm more able to speak about what I mean and what I stand for. I've become a lot more outspoken about my politics and the things that I believe in, and so that has and hopefully always will shape the podcast as well. It is, of course, really awkward to speak about yourself in this way, so I tried to make some notes before I started speaking, and to structure it, I kind of came up with 3 different sections. So number 1 is I want to talk a little bit about what my story is and how I came to do this work, and then I want to talk about what I care about, and then I want to talk about what I want to offer into the world. So what my story is, I was born in the north of Germany, and I was a pretty wild teenager, to be honest. I started working really early because I needed to, and I wanted to be independent really badly. I came up pretty late, so I didn't consider myself to be queer as a teenager. Sadly, I think that would have saved myself a lot of trouble. I had pretty open-minded parents who didn't put a lot of restrictions around me and what I could do, which was nice but also challenging in some ways. And so because I really had this strong need for stability and structure, I did a bank training after graduating from school, which is now, looking back, the weirdest thing for me to do. Having had all this freedom to, do art or English literature or whatever, I chose to do a bank training because it was paid. It was a paid training, and I really wanted to be financially independent super badly. And so I did that, and I learned a bunch of cool things. I think even for activists and artists, thinking about finances is important because we need to understand the system that we're trying to dismantle, really. However, I would never do that again now, and I'm really glad that I'm not in that environment anymore. After that, I started working in an e-commerce companies, little startups in Berlin, in Germany. I had started blogging when I was 16, so I always felt really at home in the internet and was quite techy as a young person, really loved understanding how websites are built. I was really bad at science in secondary school, but when I was on my own, I was kind of, I made my own little websites, and, I had a Tumblr and MySpace, and I was just always really into the internet. And then, so it was natural progression to kind of go and work in e-commerce startups because it was pretty easy to get in, and it was a way to get a lot of responsibility as a young person with not so many qualifications, which is what I wanted at the time. And I moved to London when I was 20. I didn't really speak English and I didn't know anyone then, but I really wanted to live abroad and I really wanted to speak English and kind of open that world to myself. And I also wanted to study with the Open University, which is a big distance university in the UK. So I found a German company that was just establishing itself in London, and I got a job as a management assistant with them, kind of progressed to be an HR manager, and did that for a couple of years while also studying social science and creative writing and psychology with the Open University. I did an open degree because I couldn't really make up my mind. Still find that really hard. I love so many different subjects and I really like working. I really love studying on my own. I think I would have liked to go to university as in like a brick and mortar one, but I just was too shy, and also I didn't have the courage to take out the loan, I think because I didn't believe in my ability to pay it back enough. That felt really scary to me, so I decided instead to work full-time and study part-time. I dropped out of university technically 3 times before I eventually graduated after 3.5 years because I just had, little meltdowns. Being really overworked with the full-time job and studying on the side was just a bit much, and I kind of regret a little bit being hard on myself, but I made it work in the end, and that's what matters. I left the e-commerce world behind eventually because it wasn't aligned with my values. I had to hire and fire people really quickly as an HR manager. It didn't really feel soulful. It was very results driven. I really learned to understand capitalism in a different way in that environment, and it wasn't good for my health and my body. There was a lot of sexism, a lot of things that I didn't have words for then, that I didn't really understand, but they were just not good for me, and eventually left London again. I liked living in London in some ways, but the room that I was able to afford was so small that I could either open the door or my wardrobe, and so that's really all you need to know. So anyway, I moved back to the continent. I lived in Amsterdam for a bit, and then I lived in Berlin for 2 years. And then I moved back to Brighton, which is where I'm now spending most of my time. So I've lived in different places. And when I left Berlin, I had been working in Berlin in e-commerce again, also as an HR manager. When I left Berlin, I became a live-in nanny in the UK, near Brighton. And I finished my my first degree there, and then I started my master's in creative media at the University of Brighton. And that was a cool time. It was really good for me to live out in nature and to work with kids. It was pretty exhausting as well, just sometimes, but just gave me lots more flexibility. I was building my work as a freelance writer and translator, and I got to study. I did a creative writing program at the University of Sussex. I did courses in photography, and I published an God, that word is so hard to pronounce. I published an anthology of queer art and writing, which was a really beautiful project and something that was supported by so many amazing people. So it really gave me a lot of confidence. And I also trained as a yoga teacher at the time, and I taught body positive queer yoga classes in Brighton for 2 years, which I'm no longer doing because I have a lot of feelings about things that I didn't understand then. I think I had good intentions, but sometimes they're just not good enough, and I didn't fully understand the weight of cultural appropriation in yoga and the many ways in which white people have commercialized something that is really so sacred. But that's what I've done at the time. And so I kind of grew into doing community work, and then I did the MA in creative media, which was also great. And then almost 3 years ago, I started the web design business that I'm now running now, and that is my main bread and butter. And that's been a really beautiful journey for which I'm so grateful, because it got me out of employment. It meant that I no longer had to work outside my house and with people who just were hard to be around. I love people so much. I have beautiful friends and I love relating to people, but I had a really hard time fitting into office politics, and I had a really hard time working from, I want to say 9 to 5, but I always had to do unpaid overtime. So that was really wearing my health down, and starting my own business has meant that I could stay home with my dog, spend more time in nature, cook my own lunch, really go with the rhythms of my body and learn new stuff and be creative. And that's been one of the biggest blessings I have in my life now. I work with people who share similar values. Many of my clients are amazing feminists and cool creative people who make art or who write or do healing work or mentoring or coaching, and each project is different, and I get to work, really see the project through and have the responsibility to manage every aspect of it and hold my client's hand and do the emotional work of that as well. So it's really varied, and I really appreciate that so much. It's been hard in the beginning. The first year I've worked very many weekends and late nights. There was a lot of uncertainty in terms of where the next client was going to come from. There were many sleepless nights around paying bills, and things have now kind of leveled out. I'm usually always booked out. It could always be, there could always be more stability, I think. But I feel that each season things are really getting easier, and I still love my work. And so, I really still wake up thinking like, that's what I want to do. And I love seeing this unfolding, how people come to me with this vague idea of wanting a website but not really being super sure what that's going to look like, and then eventually having the final product a couple of weeks later, and then really seeing that shift in their understanding of their own work and their confidence and their creativity. So that's why I still really love doing this work. And then there's this other aspect of my work, which is daydreamingwolves.com, which is more about magic and the tarot and folk herbalism. And the story with that is that I've always been really interested in magic and ritual. I got the first book on witchcraft when I was 11, on my 11th birthday. Actually, I bought it from some pocket money that I got. But as a teenager, I really forgot about most of that because I wanted to fit in, and it wasn't cool. Even though I was a teenager in the 90s, so it kind of wasn't cool in my environment. And also being a teenager was fucking hard. I really had a hard time at school. I transferred between schools a couple of times, had some great friends, but also made some pretty difficult experiences, especially in dating, and just kind of lost touch with these practices and with my enchantment with life, I would say, even if that sounds really cheesy. And I rediscovered this world when I was 23 or 24. I had a burnout when I was working as an HR manager and studying at the same time. And I just suddenly had this sense of like really needing to do some self-care, look after my body in a different way, and shed some old beliefs that I had internalized around sexism and ableism and heteronormative norms that my life had been so soaked in at the time. And so slowly rediscovered this stuff, but it really was a process over many years because I still had to work so much and study at the same time and do many different jobs. So I wasn't able to kind of devote as much energy to it as I would have wanted. But slowly and surely the resources grow that I had to invest in training and in time, and like starting things like drawing a card every morning and journaling on that a little bit, or doing a movement practice regularly. And then I started really getting into herbalism a couple of years ago. And so I would say now my main practices are the tarot and herbalism. I'm really into sensual movement and dance. And I've trained in breathwork this year, which is really beautiful as well. and I have many more plans and ideas, and yeah. So that's where I'm at now. And so about 1.5 years ago, I noticed that I still had all this personal writing about these processes and like self-care and spirituality and life on my main website, which is sarahmagdalenalove.com. But that website at the time had then grown into this web design business, and so people were coming to that site really for tech advice and like branding inspiration and my web design services. So it didn't feel right to have all that personal writing on there anymore. And out of that, I created a second website, Daydreaming Wolves, which also has been through many evolutions. It looked completely different in the beginning. There was some really awful design going on in between, I have to say. And it's strange because if you're a web designer yourself, you would think you could do this, but it's really hard sometimes to work on your own stuff. So anyway, that website looked awkward in the beginning. I'm really happy with what it looks like now, and it feels like a home to me, like a place that I enjoy spending time at and would like to write more for it. But yeah, I'm really grateful for the readership that has grown around that website, the people that are on my newsletter list, and I think what made it such a beautiful process as well is the fact that I didn't have to make it a source of income. It really was a very organic process, which to be honest wasn't true for the web design business. With that, I sometimes in the beginning had to compromise what I believe in because I just needed to make an income. And I had to say yes to pretty much every project that came my way in the beginning. And that's okay because I learned a lot from that and I no longer have to do that. But yeah, just really seeing now how Daydreaming Wolves is growing and how I can be really discerning with what I want to write about. I don't have to push myself, and I just come up with content when I feel like it, you know. The podcast in the beginning, I came out with like 1 episode a month, and I'm now podcasting more regularly, but I don't, you know, there's really no pressure technically. I'm now offering tarot readings on there, which has also been like an interesting process in itself. It took me years to find the confidence to do that. It's been something that I wanted to do for a long time, but just felt shy about for a long time, and especially in the last few weeks had really beautiful experiences with people requesting readings for such tender questions that they had, and yeah, giving me such beautiful feedback for that. So I want to talk a tiny bit about my approach with that. I do audio recorded readings because I'm such an introvert. This is how I love to receive tarot readings for myself. I love meeting people on Skype, but when I'm receiving a reading from someone, I sometimes worry a little bit that if that was the medium we chose, I would find it hard to really take everything in. So I love receiving recorded videos or written ones because recording readings or written ones because then I can have something that I can hold in my hands and that I can revisit and come back to and work with and really digest that way. And also I really like the audio format because, you know, sometimes energy is low, and I find for myself at least what I can always do before falling asleep is like listening to a podcast or to some kind of other audio recording, and that feels really comforting for me because even like watching something can be overstimulation sometimes. There's so much going on in our days, and I like just sitting in the dark and connecting with someone's voice or recording something for them. So when I read for people, I usually do it in the night when it's dark out. I have candles on. I do a little ritual for myself first. I light candles and, you know, do some breath work or some movement, and then I do the reading and I record for the person a custom grounding meditation to start with so that we can both be really present with the reading. And then I walk them through the cards and I offer a journaling question for each of the cards. And then because I am so into plant magic and herbalism as well, I also offer at least one plant to work with and an idea for either a recipe or a ritual that the person can do to kind of help them on their path. And I care to do that because I think that readings are more powerful if we really engage with them in a way. So I received readings sometimes when I was anxious or I felt I had to make some big decisions in my life, I was almost like asking the same question again and like coming to the cards and be like, what should I do, but wasn't really listening. I would turn the cards and I wasn't really feeling into what was happening in my body. I didn't journal so much about the cards that came up, and those readings were still insightful, but I think it's a dishonor to the beautiful ritual that a reading can be. And so I no longer want to do that, and I want to offer people a way to engage with readings on a deeper level as well. And so that format is something that works for me really well. I think journaling can be really powerful, as can working with plants. I don't do predictive readings, and I don't do readings that involve other people that haven't really given their consent to be in the reading. That's just kind of a personal boundary that I draw. And in terms of predicting the future, I think that's not, I don't make a judgment on whether that's possible or not, but I don't think that it's always the most fruitful or rewarding question to ask. I think very often what is really powerful to ask is what is in the shadows, like what are we not seeing about our current situation, and where are we disconnected from our own intuition, where are we ignoring the wisdom that we already have. Or where are we getting so distracted by the chatter from the outside world that we're finding it hard to know what is true for us? And so these are kind of questions that I'm trying to illuminate with my readings for myself and other people as well. Yeah, so this is how Daydreaming Wolves came to be, and that's kind of part of my story, I guess. I also wanted to talk about things I care about. I really care for my work to be accessible. And I know that is something that I'm not always getting perfectly right, and it's also something that I'm still wrapping my head around in many ways. There are certainly kind of people out there who feel like healing work should always be free, and like, how can you charge for something that is magical in a way? And that is difficult, because I feel that this work should be valued and paid, and currently as it is, we are living under capitalism and we have to pay bills, and I think we should be able to charge for our work. At the same time, I care about this work so much that I want it to be accessible for everyone. And what I found most helpful in that at the moment is the fact that we can put out so much free content in a way that is not costing us a lot of money. So I podcast a lot, I write blog posts, and I offer a free audio course which is called Everyday Magic, in which I talk about folk herbalism and the tarot, and it has like different guided audio journals. Really cool, you should check it out. Anyway, so I am able to share a lot of my work, and I can kind of pass on a lot of the things that I have learned to other people without needing to charge them, because it's easy for me to produce that. But when I'm investing my one-on-one time, I do need to get paid, and so it's all about finding that balance, I guess. What else? What did I want to say? Sorry, I lost the plot there for a second. Yeah, and also I think what is interesting about this progress also in like putting media out, I mean, I am coming back to what I learned in my MA in creative media, but I really don't feel like I needed that qualification necessarily to do this work. I love seeing how more of us are stepping up and out to kind of spread the message of things that they believe in, and in this way we're educating each other, which is really political and really powerful. And I also think it's interesting to kind of grow into these dynamics where we are always the student and we're always the teacher at the same time. I don't see myself as a teacher in a conventional way, really. I feel that I am passing on something that I have had the privilege to learn and that I'm really grateful for, and that feels good to me. Other things I care about are political aspects of healing. Like the politics of healing are really important to me, because I think that so many of us as activists burn out or feel shame around the ways we're not able to show up as much as we would want to. And so I think self-care is incredibly important, as is community care. I think it's important that we look at the relationships that we have with each other and that we decolonize them, and that we find ways to challenge and dismantle white supremacy and colonialism in the many ways that it has impacted our lives. I think as white people we have an obligation really to do more, to challenge racism and to build resilience and to share the resources that we have and the privileges that we have in many ways. I also really care about animism, which is something that I'm still learning so much about, but I would describe it as a belief in there being a spirit in everything on the earth, and really honoring nature and things like trees and plants as living beings that have their own agency and incredible beauty and resilience. And I believe that capitalism relies on us disconnecting from that living, breathing world, because we would otherwise not be able to exploit it in the way that we're doing. So I think magic for me is political because it reconnects us with the cycles of life, the cycles that capitalism is suppressing because it's going for this endless expansion, because it's reconnecting us with pleasure and beauty and our own bodies and our relationships and the resilience that we can have and feel in our communities. And because it gives us back a feeling of enchantment with life and our own stories in a way. And I think ritual is important for that. I think ritual is incredibly important to create space for us in our heads and minds and hearts to really question what's going on in the world, because it isn't normal. I think the ways that we're living together aren't normal. We have normalized a lot of suffering and violence and oppression, and I think pausing and making space for ritual and enchantment and magic is really such a threat to that, and so I am so here for that. I also care about community. I love speaking to other people and inviting people on the podcast and seeing what they're thinking and feeling, and having these conversations is really meaningful to me. And then finally I wanted to talk about what I want to offer. So I want to offer as much free stuff as possible. I really want to build this podcast more. I want to engage and have conversations with more beautiful people. I really want to offer more readings and put more time into that. Right now I'm only able to offer a limited number each week because I mainly do the web design work, which is great, but I love this tarot reading work as well, and I would love to do more with that. I really want to continue studying herbalism because it's been such a transformative force in my work and in my life and my body. It's really helped with my health and mental health and with my overall well-being, so I want to study more and share more of that. I'm also training as a celebrant, and I want to specifically offer rituals and ceremonies for queer people, because I think that because many of us are not getting married and having kids, or kind of following these conventional structures of what a life could look like, we often don't get a chance to celebrate ourselves and our milestones in meaningful ways. So I would love to offer alternative queer commitment ceremonies to couples. I would love to offer naming and blessings to trans people. I would love to help more people get married to themselves the way I did in a beautiful ritual. I mainly want to really encourage and inspire people to create their own magic and their own ritual. So yeah, that's what I want to do. I've been talking for a while now. I think I'm going to stop here, and I hope it gave you an idea of what Daydreaming Wolves is about and where I'm coming from and what my values are. If you've got any questions at all, speak to me on any social media channels. You will find all of them at daydreamingwolves.com, and that's also where you can sign up for the free audio course that I'm offering. Thank you so much for listening. Have a really beautiful day.